If you're thinking about moving to Abbotsford, hold up, because some neighborhoods are amazing and other neighborhoods, not so much. Stick around, because today we're ranking the worst and best neighborhoods to live in based on the Livability Index. You're not going to believe which neighborhoods actually rank the lowest, and if you're planning to move here, you need to watch till the end so you don't make a big mistake. So here we are on areavibes.com with a livability score in Abbotsford of 72. Area Vibes is a good website for seeing the livability of different cities and different neighborhoods. In comparison, let's say a city like Langley is at 84, and that's one of the higher ranked livabilities in Canada. Vancouver, on the other hand, is, let's say, a 78. And I don't think you can base Abbotsford's livability just off of this score, because it's brought down by certain neighborhoods and a lot of neighborhoods, because you can see Abbotsford is surrounded by like rural, farmy areas, and all of those areas receive low livability scores because they're a bit further away from places. So for that, and the cost of living is going to be higher because, let's say, a place like Matsqui Prairie, where some of the smallest places you can get are acres and acres of land, that's going to come with a bigger price tag than any other property or house would down in the main parts of Abbotsford. Also had to re-record this, so that's why I'm wearing different things. I'm in a whole different spot, but it is what it is. I want to break down these scores that have been given to Abbotsford, and then we'll dive deeper into the neighborhoods, and we'll go over the top rated neighborhoods, the lowest rated neighborhoods by livability, and if these scores actually check out, because I actually don't think they do. I think there's better neighborhoods. I don't think the livability score is everything, basically. I think some neighborhoods are actually better and more livable even. So we can see livability. These are the different scores. If I just scroll down here, we can go one by one. So amenities, there are many local amenities. There are not many amenities close to this location. So yes, we have parks. There is some entertainment. There's food and drink. For somebody who lives here, it's really not that bad. But, you're not going to be able to, sometimes there's concerts here, like major concerts. You won't be able to see big sporting events. There's not any clubs or nightlife. So amenity wise, I think that's the reason it gets an F. In comparison to bigger cities, let's say a Langley, Vancouver, it's nowhere near providing the same amount of amenities. Not saying it doesn't have any, has everything you really need. I rarely need to actually leave Abbotsford. Commute talks about public transit. Most people buses are available, but we can see 1% of the population here actually takes public transit, lower than the Canadian average. So most people do drive. Growing up, most people were driving. Not as many people take the bus. It's just easier to get around here driving, but it also depends on where you live. I've made a video on the best places to live if you want to rely on public transport. Put that somewhere here. Check it out. Cost of living in Abbotsford is 1% more than average, but British Columbia is 23% more than average. So what does that really say? The cost of living is high in comparison to other places in the world, but in comparison to BC, it's actually better than most areas. Compared to Vancouver, most places in the Lower Mainland, it's going to give you a better cost of living. So it really depends on what you're comparing it to. Crime is rated at a B-. So still 8% lower than the Canadian average. Is it the least crime area in the world? No. Does it have the most crime? No. I think it really depends. I'm going to make my next video on the safest parts to live in Abbotsford. It depends on where you live, and we'll be able to see that as we go through these communities. It'll show the score changes based on what neighborhood you're actually in. So there's certain neighborhoods that have A for crime because there really isn't much crime, and there are certain neighborhoods which crime is more and more prevalent. Employment, so we've got median household income. So people are doing pretty decent in Abbotsford for the most part. We have a hospital, lots of pharmacies, lots of doctors. So A+ for health and safety overall. House prices, we talked about cost of living. That's probably factored in there. It is higher than the Canadian average, but rent prices are lower. So you can't always trust these numbers. They're kind of wonky. And 69% of people actually own homes in Abbotsford. Schools, it's given it a C, which I don't think it's rightfully deserved. We don't have a lot of private schools here, and I think that's probably why we aren't given such a high score here, but I work in the school district, and I think the public schools here are actually amazing, depending on what you're trying to do and what your kids are going for. Great graduation rates, lower than the Canadian average. I know some farmers, though, and it really depends on what, is school everything for certain people? I know farmers who drop out of school early. Their parents own tons and tons of farmland. Their family own tons and tons of farmland. That's all they want to do is really farm. So do they need to graduate? They have no real use for it. They'd rather just work and make money. We've got some 5 user ratings at 71%. I don't think that's super important. So now that we've kind of broken this down, let's go to neighborhoods here. And it's going to show us the most, or the highest ranked and least ranked. And then we'll kind of dive in and break that down a little bit because, like I said earlier, I don't think these scores are everything. And there's some communities or neighborhoods that are still better than the ones on the list. So the best neighborhoods in Abbotsford by livability. We've got the McMillan area, West Town Line, South Clearbrook, Town Line Hill, and Clearbrook Center. If we're basing these off just livability, as in being able to walk around, maybe Clearbrook Center and McMillan would be pretty good. But yeah, this is not the list I would choose. And as we'll go through here and I'll break it down further for you guys. The worst neighborhoods, they're all like Sumas, Mount Lehman, Bradner, South Popular, all farm areas. Sumas Mountain isn't a farm area, but it's on a mountain. Things are spread out really apart. There's not much up there other than houses, big houses, in fact, big properties. They're spaced out. I have some friends who live up there. Absolutely phenomenal, beautiful houses. The people that live up there are usually more well off because prices are higher. And same with all these places. Prices are going to be higher. But let's, now that I've told you the best neighborhoods that this website's telling you and the worst neighborhoods, I'm going to show you why and tell you why it's not a good indicator to just go off these. I actually think McMillan is probably one of the best areas to live in. So McMillan's right here and Eagle Mountain is right here. But let's just click into McMillan so we can see amenities B+, whereas overall in Abbotsford was getting an F. And that's why taking just the overall livability score into consideration, it's not the best way to go about it because all of these on the outskirts of Abbotsford really drop the score down. All the neighborhoods on the outskirts, commute A+, cost of living F. It's going to be one of the more pricier areas. Crime A+, employment A+. So people are probably making way better median income. We can see in this area, health A+, housing A+, schools A-, overall A+ rating. So even though Abbotsford not rated so high, we can have these neighborhoods that are absolutely amazing. And I do think this is one of the better neighborhoods to live in. Is it my favorite? No, but I do think it is one of the better neighborhoods to live in. And I think, based off the list that we were given, I think having McMillan at the top it's right. It's at the top. I do believe it is probably one of the better places to live. Great schools. You can see the different things here. The cost of living isn't going to be as good, but less homelessness. No, really not as much crime. Can't go wrong living in the McMillan area. And I've made tons of other videos and I talk about the McMillan area. Let's just go. Can I go back? Here we go. Okay, so we're back at these other neighborhoods. So I did talk about McMillan, which I think is rightfully in, where it's supposed to be. Before we go any further, I actually want to talk about all of these areas. So the more rural farm areas, they're rated very low. Matsqui actually gets a 59. A couple of them are just above 50, but Mount Lehman, it's just really out of the way. We can see it's not near towards the inside of the city, which is just going to reduce the livability, because there isn't going to be any amenities there. The commuting from there is going to be terrible. The cost of living, there's farms there. Crime is going to be pretty good in these areas. Actually, there's less crime, not A plus, but there is less crime. Employment is going to be likely an A. Let's just check it out. So crime, not good. So like I said, commute, not good. Amenities, not good. Cost of living, crime, good. Employment, good. Health, it's not near the hospital. Housing, again, it's farms. So price tag is going to be very high. Schools, B minus. Really, you only have access to elementary school nearby there. I wish I knew how to go back. Is there a way to go back with using short keys? I guess not for now. We'll just go about it this way. Okay, so I mean, that's a similar story with all these other farm areas. They're going to be very similar, where amenities are an F, commute's going to be an F, cost of living F, crime is going to be pretty good, employment's going to be pretty good, housing is going to be mediocre, and the rest of these are going to be most likely, I mean, schools might be okay. They've all got some decent schools, elementary schools. But they're all going to be very similar in that sense. Matsqui actually has a bit of a higher livability. I do also think that's because it's somewhat closer to things. It's right next to Mission. I lived in Matsqui. I grew up in Matsqui, and I wasn't able to drive for most of the time I lived there, but I could jump in a car, and in 10 minutes I was across this bridge into Mission, and there's tons of different shops and things like that there. So don't like, if you want to live in Abbotsford and you want farm area or you want land, don't, just because these have a low livability score, not decide to live there. I lived in Matsqui. It's amazing. It's a great place to live. Like I said, I have friends living in Sumas Mountain. Great place to live. They have beautiful properties. I've had friends growing up who lived up in this area, had amazing properties, lots of land to do things with. One of my friends actually had a tree house in his backyard. It was a project kind of made by a bunch of us kids. And it was absolutely phenomenal. Lots of parties and things like that we had up there. So now that I've talked about the outer areas, I want to go in here and talk about some areas I think which were rated maybe a bit too high, and some areas that don't get the recognition didn't get the recognition that they deserve. So we did talk about the McMillan area, and I want to kind of talk about this area here in pockets, because that's essentially what it is. West Town Line Hill, and West Clearbrook are all going to be very similar. Fairfield, Clearbrook Center. Actually, Fairfield's a little bit further out of the way, so let's not include that. Fairfield isn't a terrible area. I just think it is closer to Matsqui. Certain areas are less livable, harder to get to things. Maybe not the best place to live, but I've seen some nice properties there too. Townline Hill. Okay, so Townline Hill had some of the higher ratings. Do I think it's a great place to live? Yes. I actually worked in this area for a while. I think it's a great neighborhood. People there are amazing. I think it's getting a bit more crowded. It's good that it's by the highway, because you can jump on the highway. It's the furthest exit west in Abbotsford. So if you're going west, it's a great place to live, to easily be able to commute. But I don't think, and the crime's not terrible. Townline Hill for the longest time had gang issues. I do think it's actually cleaned up a ton. Sometimes I still see people saying, oh no, Townline Hill has all these gang issues, blah, blah, blah. When I worked in the area, I worked at the high school where the big gang issues were actually occurring as well. Let's say when I graduated in 2010, ton of gang problems. When I went to the school, when I taught at the school, 2018, weren't really having gang issues. People, if there was issues, kids were getting kicked out right away. The community has really cleaned up, and those issues aren't as much of an issue anymore. This area is going to be dominated, and West Clearbrook as well, by East Indians, Punjabi people, people from Asia, not your typical I don't even know what your typical Canadian is anymore, but they're not going to be, most likely going to be white. So if that's an issue with you, go towards East Abbotsford. So that's the kind of demographic shift you will see. You will see a lot of Asian people on the west side of Abbotsford, and as you go east, you're going to get more or less ethnic people on this side, melting pot kind of in the middle, even lots of refugees and things like that in central Abbotsford. So West Town Line, I think it's a good place to live, but I think it's rated higher than it should have been. Maybe because there is lots of amenities close by, it got rated higher, but I still don't think, if it was anything, it'd be like number 5. I didn't think it belonged in number 2. That's, I think, way too high for it. South Clearbrook. So let's talk about Clearbrook Center, Mill Lake, South Clearbrook. Let's talk about Clearbrook Center and South Clearbrook, because they are a little bit different than actually West Clearbrook. I live in the South Clearbrook area, phenomenal area. And I mean, these areas are all going to be very similar, but in the sense that for housing, there's a lot of multi-generational homes. Lots are definitely a lot bigger. You'll find families with parents, grandparents, kids all living there, sometimes even grandkids. So you can expect that in these areas. Crime is better on the west side and east side of Abbotsford, but more you get towards the center, I do think it's worse. But anyway, getting back to South Clearbrook, I do tend to get distracted. I think it's a good area to live. Amenities are close by. Commute's good because you're right along the highway. That's the best thing I love about living in the South Clearbrook area, is if I need to get to the highway, I'm literally maybe 3 minutes away to getting to the highway. Cost of living, again, pricing Clearbrook Center is definitely going to be better cost of living. It's not an F. I think it's like a B-, but you're going to find more like apartments, things of that sort here. So it's smaller, and that's why the cost of living is going to be less. But South Clearbrook, mainly homes, some apartments. They're building more in this area, but a great area to live. It popped up. Well, Clearbrook Center was 5. South Clearbrook was actually 3rd. Again, do I think South Clearbrook deserves that 3rd place? I don't think West Town Line belongs up here, and Town Line Hill, they're very similar. I would actually, West Town Line and Town Line Hill, put them into one. And South Clearbrook, do I think it belongs in some of the best? I do. That's the area I live in. I wouldn't live here if I didn't think so. Where, I'm not going to rank it here. Do I think it's the 2nd best place? No, I actually think keeping it at 3 would be where I would keep it, because I'm going to talk about where I think 2nd would be in a little bit here. So now I've talked about Clearbrook Center, South Clearbrook, this Babbage, Mill Lake area, and Abbotsford Central, let's call it. I mean, the good thing with Abbotsford Central, it kind of pops up in the university area, so I think the livability is higher for that reason. But Babbage, Abbotsford Center, and Mill Lake, lots of crime. More crime in these areas in comparison to everywhere else in Abbotsford. Still good for commuting because you're near the highway, minus Babbage, but it's not far. But the crime is definitely going to be higher. Cost of living, depending where you are. You can get all different types of housing in these areas. So like you can find houses, apartments, condos, townhouses in all 3 of these areas. There's lots of availability of different things, but I think the crime here and employment wise, the median incomes are going to be lower in these 3 areas. Schools are actually decent in these areas. There's a good amount of schools, but yeah, the big thing you're giving up is safety and crime when you're living, especially in Abbotsford Center. I'm surprised. Was Abbotsford Center? No, Abbotsford Center was not in the top 5. Abbotsford Center is actually ranked so high. I think it's taking into consideration that part, like the university districts here. This goes off of McCallum Highway. There's some nice spots here, but a lot of this is not nice. So that's another thing. These scores don't tell the whole picture of the neighborhood. Parts of the neighborhood are nice, parts aren't. Like Aberdeen here. Part of West Abbotsford, it's probably somewhere in this area. There's a pocket here a really nice community, very expensive homes, brand new homes, great place to live, lots of shops and things like that nearby, but it's giving a very low livability score because it's not showing the whole picture of this neighborhood. It's just a small pocket of it, which could be rated very high in consideration to everything else. So coming back to this area, I do like the Mill Lake area. I don't mind the Abbotsford Center area, but the crime, the homelessness, it just doesn't, it's not for me. So I personally wouldn't like living in these areas. I don't mind going to Mill Lake all the time, but living in these areas, not my cup of tea. And we talked about McMillan. Whatcom, was it rated up in here? No, but some of them are tied, right? There's a bunch of them that are getting 78. So Whatcom area is also getting a 78. And I think it's a great place to live. It's right beside the McMillan area. It's very hilly. Part of this area has flooded last year right towards the edge. But other than, I really don't have anything bad to say about this area other than it's a bit further east. So if you're traveling west, maybe not as good for you because you can sometimes get stuck in traffic on the highway here. But really nice homes. The best thing about this area and part of the McMillan area is the views, and the Upper 10 Oaks area. You get some amazing views. You're nestled up right against Sumas Mountain, so lots of hiking, lots of biking trails, lots of things to do nature-wise. Beautiful views of Mount Baker from the Whatcom area. One of my friends is always posting all the time of the views out of his window. Absolutely phenomenal. Cost of living is going to definitely, you're paying for that view. You definitely are. People are going to be making good money in these areas, but amenities, it's okay, right? Not a ton, but it's getting better. They've been developing this area more and more, and it is improving. And what was the other one that's rated 78? Like South Clearbrook versus Whatcom, it's really going to depend on your personality, what you like better. But Clearbrook Center was also given a 78, and I would live in Whatcom any day in comparison to Clearbrook Center. So, if I was ranking these, Whatcom would definitely be higher than Clearbrook Center. And at the end, we'll give a bit of a ranking of what I actually think should be the highest and lowest. And one area, the last areas I kind of want to talk about, Old Claiborne, which has part of the Upper 10 Oaks. This is like Lower 10 Oaks area, so this isn't split up. Again, it's not telling the whole picture with these livability scores, but only given a 75. And I think this is the biggest mishap of this website, because this area out of every other area in Abbotsford is probably the one where, I lived in Matsqui, so I went to school in this Old Claiborne area, and it's phenomenal. It's a very family-friendly neighborhood. Good to, it's really all families living in this area. There's starting to be some apartments more for families still, though. I work in this area. I'm in this community daily, in and out, and it's a phenomenal place to be, and I'm surprised it's actually rated so low. Upper 10 Oaks gives a bit of a higher ranking, which I'm surprised because there's almost even less amenities in this area. Cost of living is even higher, but I'm guessing the median income is way higher. Crime is going to be a bit better in this area. And with this Old Claiborne area, because there's like little pockets of it on this edge, which may have higher crime, but most of the area is actually very good. And I'm going to go into it here and let's see what was actually said. So amenities, F, I would agree. That's the one thing this area is lacking, is amenities. It doesn't have as much. Like I said, growing up, it's not like our high school. It's not one where you can just like walk over and there's shops everywhere. You have to get in your car. You have to be able to drive. So not until like grade 12, we'd actually go out for lunch and go do things, because we had access to a vehicle. But up until then, like I said, it's mainly family oriented, people walking around all the time, but not to go to shops, just to walk around, hang out, do things. It's not easy to walk to shops here. Again, just like the Whatcom area, it's building. This whole area is getting bigger and bigger. It's growing. They're putting more shops and things like that here, but not as high of a livability, because
get amenities. It's got a B plus in crime. I do think there are certain pockets of it that make it worse just along the edge, but the rest of it is actually very good. Cost of living, it's been giving an F, which also I'm surprised about, because if you want to get a single family home, a detached home, you can actually find some of the cheapest homes in Abbotsford on this side of town in this area. So that's why it actually surprises me under 1 million. That's why I was actually surprised by this cost of living factor here, but I think it's also now including the upper 10 Oaks area, which I can't zoom out to or cut out, but up here it's definitely more expensive versus down on the mountain. So I would personally give this a higher rating, and if I was going to re-rank these Macmillan, I would definitely keep at the top. Second place, however, I would give to Old Claiborne. I do think it is more livable and better than some of these other areas, or than West Town Line. I would keep South Clearbrook at third. At fourth and fifth would be a toss-up for me. Either I would do Town Line, like West Town Line Hill, combine them into one, or the Whatcom area. That's where my rankings would go for the best neighborhoods by livability in Abbotsford. I do think these are a little bit off, and that's totally okay. Like I said, there's certain pockets of the neighborhoods which are better than others. Hopefully that's helped you. Hopefully that can help you make a decision of where you want to be. If you need some help, make sure you hit me up. And if you're thinking of moving to the Valley, there's other options for you. It's not just Abbotsford. We have Mission up here, which is a great place to live in the Valley. We also have Chilliwack. It's a bit further away. The Chilliwack's livability is actually quite low because it is so much further out. Mission's is pretty close to Abbotsford. But there's options for you instead of just Abbotsford if maybe it's not for you. Maybe you need something more quiet, right? And Chilliwack could be a good mix. Maybe you need to work in Vancouver. Mission has a train that goes all the way from Mission into downtown Vancouver. So I've made a video that compares all three cities and is going to show which one is best for who. So make sure you go and check that out, and I'll see you all in the next video.